Well, good morning, and thanks again for tuning in. I hope you're well. We want to talk about music and faith. Surprise! And what I was thinking today, or really all week, about the instrument. And without anybody to play the instrument, it sits here. And I know I grew up in New York, and it was almost a joke. Sometimes the realtor would say, "Oh, and there's a piano in the basement." Like that was a deal to buy the house, and it's because they weighed so much, nobody wanted to move them, and they had no value because nobody played them. But it was like, they still would pretend like, "Oh, it's good. There's a piano in that basement, and it's free." And I just remember that from when I was a kid, and so I just think about that. Sometimes a beautiful thing is just a piece of furniture, and it's a shame because you get used to it. I go to a lot of houses, but I've been houses with a beautiful piano and nobody plays it, and they've got like nice flowers on it and pictures, and you can tell it's never opened and played, and it looks nice as a piece of furniture, but it really sells it short. So that's all fine, and then I got to thinking about, in faith, we're the instruments. Like I think of myself, well, I'm like a piano, and I'm not really any good unless God is using me to, in this case, to to make the music, or whatever it is He's called you to do. You think of yourself like we think of ourselves as vessels, and then God takes us and uses us, and that's really the thing that really rolls around in my head. There's, when the Israelites are led out of Egypt, and then they go through, of course, the molten calf and all that, and they get all that settled, and then God instructs them on making the ark, and it's quite detailed and it's quite elaborate, and they didn't have factories or anything. It was just them, and it goes on to say how God took people and filled them with His Spirit, and therefore they were able to do these weavings, the fabrics, the workmanship, all of it. I mean, it's a terrific read, and yet it was God who filled them with that knowledge. And then what must that be like to, 1 minute I'm in Exodus, I'm wandering through the desert, and I'm Phil, I know how to work with gold, and you do. And then, it's the same thing with Solomon when he's constructing the temple. With David and Solomon, is God took people and He filled them with this ability to, they said that they didn't cut any of the stones on the location. It was all done and then carried, and everything fit perfectly. What a skill. We would call these people master craftsmen, except that it was God who filled them with His abilities, and they were able to accomplish. If you just read it, well, it would take me 20 years just to figure out how to start that engraving, and yet they did, hundreds and hundreds of this and that, and pans and buckets, and the bronze sea, and the bulls, everything. So that's the thing that I like to think about, is how it's good to realize that you're a vessel, and then make sure that you're not just a piece of furniture. And so you don't look at yourself and see limits. You just look at yourself and say, "Oh, I'm a vessel, and you made me, so I like when you use me." And then you're not afraid of difficult tasks or of simple tasks, because it's God who comes through you and uses you. Right? Isn't it in, I forget which one of the Gospels, He sends out 70 people, Jesus sends out 70 people, fills them with the Spirit, and they are able to cast out demons, to heal the sick, to do all the things Jesus was doing. And it's because the Spirit of God came through them, and that must be, wow, an awesome thing to have that kind of power. And then, of course, they go on later on to make the mistake. Should we call down fire and destroy these people? They thought, "Oh, I'm going to use this power," and this is the big mistake. And Jesus says, "You don't know what kind of spirit you're of. Don't say those things. We're here to help people, not to kill people." And so, what is that when God takes you and uses you, and you accomplish this great thing, and then that task is over? Because you can't spend your whole life filled with the Spirit of God, because you would probably be destroyed. And so when he sets you back down, you're a vessel. I mean, when a piano is not being used, it is then a piece of furniture, because we do like to put pictures and things on it. So there has to be times when you're inactive. And then what do you do when you're inactive? And I was thinking that's what practicing is for. When I practice, it's not because I'm looking forward to my next great, I'm just practicing because I'm praying. And I know what it's like when God's in me and uses me. And I bet you all do, if you think about things where it's like, wow, that was an amazing thing, and it all just worked out so well. And it was God, and he used you. So, okay, now he sets you down, and then in music I want to practice because it feels so good when God uses you. And practicing is like keeping the fire warm. It just reminds you. And it becomes a prayer, because now I'm trying to listen and understand music. So practice is a eternal refining. When you do something, it leads you to something else, and the levels go deeper and deeper. Right? God says that people who love God, they delight to study his works. And so whatever it is, it's endless. And even though it may sound to the person listening just, blah, 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 same thing, and they say, are you ever going to learn it? And I just laugh. I don't laugh at them, but because I used to think that. I said, why am I ever going to learn it? And it's because every time you get one thing right, then something else can be tweaked. And it's in a beautiful spot. So when God's not using you, then you're praying. And what happens is you learn to hear God's voice. And then when something comes along that maybe intimidates you, but you hear God's voice, you say, wow, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to attempt this. And of course, for us in faith is always, well, for me, reading the Bible, but praying, talking to God. One of the great things is when he sets you down again for a rest, you realize how unworthy you are. Because in my mind, I have all of the, there's so many things in my head, I wish I could just get rid of this. Things I say, why do I think that? But here I am thinking it. Or, and you realize that you're just a vessel and not even honorable until God grabs you and uses you. And that's a good thing too, because then we can look at everybody else. And instead of saying, oh, what are you doing this about? I just say, I can remember doing that, or boy, that's what I look like. Anyway, you internalize it. And it keeps you humble. And if you're humble, you just want to pray. And in music, of course, that means you want to practice. And the more you practice, the more comfortable you become making music. And the more you practice faith, the more comfortable you become using faith. And so it's like everything was like a beautiful growing from seed. But I was thinking about how in the world did they make the Ark of the Covenant in the desert, because it's just too incredible. So you cannot deny that God did it. And everything I'm showing you in the Bible, it will do it in you. And this is how I work. And the beauty of God is he's steadfast and he's consistent. This is how he works. First, he dazzles you, and then he teaches you. Don't be dazzled by yourself. Just be dazzled by me. And sometimes I will work through you. And you won't get a big head. You won't become arrogant. I guess some people do. There's a thing in music, I know, when you've prepared for a recital, whatever, in school, or a concert that you're giving, and you're playing and performing, and it's going well, your body produces this, it's called a high. Like, every activity has that, right? The runner's high or whatever. And it can become addicting. And I've read of people who they perform because they love that high. And they don't like is the corresponding low after you're done You know, I think if you read a lot about the Olympic athletes, they have a lot of tragic stories about how their whole beginning of their life is preparing for this one thing, and it happens. And then there's a lot of tragedy in those people's lives, which I think is should be more publicized. So anyway, and if you don't go through the low, you don't reconnect with God inside of your vessel. You think that you're no longer the vessel, but you're the power going through the vessel. And you just always want to be the vessel. So you always have to be checking in with God, and He'll, you know, He cleans you, whatever. He uses you, He sets you down, He picks you up, uses you for whatever, and then don't make any comments about the other vessels, because He made every one of them and He's using them. And so that's what I was thinking about, and it was a great comfort to me. So if you have a piano in your basement, get it tuned and play it. Anyway, thanks very much, and I hope you have a good week.